My name is Raquel. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm grateful to be here today. I want to welcome the newcomers, encourage you to stay. Good place to be. I hope you stay long enough to find that out. And I really, really do mean that. And the reason that I say that is because when I came into the program, there was a lady that used to sit in the back, and every time that she introduced herself, she would say that she welcomed the newcomers, and it always made me feel good inside when she said it. So usually when you like something, you take it from somebody else. You know, that's the way we do it here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Nothing's really an original. I'm a fill-in speaker here, and I'm not really a speaker, so bear with me. Carl asked me to take his place, and I worked with Carl for a couple of years, and he was an Eskimo for me in a lot of ways, and he was also a teacher, and I respect him very much. So he told me he was sick, and I also got flattered that he asked me to fill in for him, and I forgot that I was sick too. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous before my sobriety date. My sobriety date is November 17th, 1992. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous 8 months before that. And when I came in through a side door, which was prison. I had drank and I had used for a lot of years, actually 35 years. And I wanted to live differently. I wanted a different kind of life. I was sick and tired of living the way I had been living, and I didn't know how to live any differently. You know, when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had come 15 years before that on a DUI. And with that DUI, I was just like Robert. I'm a quick study. I go in and I find out what I have to do, and I had this little green card, and they had told me that I had to get it signed 6 times. I walked into that room and I looked around and I said, I do not belong here. And it was La Puente Center, and I seen the walls, and they were like a little bit smudged with smoke and everything, even though I'm a smoker. And the people I didn't feel like I belonged. And I heard them sharing, and I was closed down. But what I seen was that they signed my card, and then I came another time and they signed it again, and then I decided I didn't need to be there. I could sign my own card. So if you have a card, you don't have to be here either. But what happened for me was a seed was planted. And like I said, I never knew that there was a solution. I started drinking at the age of maybe 12 and a half, 13, and I also come from a dysfunctional family. I never knew what that word meant until I came in here. I just thought we were all screwed up, you know. And I always had that fear that a lot of alcoholics have deep down within. You know, I had that opening, that void that I've heard shared here so many times. In fact, when I heard about that, I immediately identified with that. I always felt like there was something missing in my life. I always felt like I was off beat, off key. I never fit in. I never felt like I was okay. I remember my disease started before I even started drinking, actually. It was my thinking. Also, I was always trying to fix on something else. The first time that I tried to fill that hole was with food. I remember stuffing my face and stuffing my face and stuffing my face, trying to fill that hole, and my stomach would get full, but that void would still be there. And when I took a drink, it was, like I said, when I was around 12 or 13. I really don't know exactly when. And I come out of the Ramona Garden Projects, and there everybody drinks, it seems, and everybody's using, and everybody's on welfare, and everybody's fighting. But I hated it. I hated it. And my friends were ditching school, and of course those are the kind of friends that I look for, the ones that I fit in with. And I ended up ditching, and we ended up getting a bottle of Thunderbird. That was my first drink, Thunderbird, with a little twist of lemon. And it went down real smooth. In fact, I still remember the way it went down. It warmed my belly, and all of a sudden, I felt like I was somebody. I felt like I could do anything, and I felt like I was Sophia Loren. For the younger people, Angelina Jolie. I was beautiful. And I never felt like that before. And alcohol did for me what nothing else could do. The only thing was that I believed that I already had the allergy, and I got the phenomenon of craving. Once I have a drink, one is not enough. I need to have more. The more I drink, the thirstier I get. And what happens to me is I go out and I get into a blackout. And when I go into blackouts, I don't know what I'm doing. And I start doing a lot of demoralizing things. And the next day, those friends, they always want to tell me what I did. And I know I've done something wrong, so I don't want to hear what they're saying. And I always say, I know. Just like the newcomer says every time you try to give them direction. I know. And I didn't drink every single day, but I did drink as many times as I possibly could and whenever I could. And every time that I drank, things happened to me. I started going into nightclubs at a young age. I looked older than what I was. I was overdeveloped, and I thought it was a good quality. And I met my first common law husband in a bar. And for me, I don't go to places like libraries and churches and things like that to meet men. I go into bars and I go to parks, and the kind of men that I like are the kind that are tattooed, buffed out, and just came out of San Quentin. They make me tingle. And when I walk in to a bar, I always seem to find the one that looks the most charismatic, and I end up finding out that it's psychosis. And I always think that we're going to ride off into the sunset with twin palominos. And this one man that I picked up, we were together for quite a while, and what I didn't know was that he was a heroin addict. And I had heard about those heroin addicts. See, my dad was a heroin addict, and my mother had left him. He was also a schizophrenic, and he also liked little children, and I was a child. Thank you, Robert. And I had always heard bad things about heroin addicts, you know, but this man, I forgot everything I heard. And we were going to teach each other about life, everlasting. And he came into my life, and I had this baby at a little bit, I guess 13 and a half. And I remember when I had that baby that I thought that baby was going to love me like nobody had ever loved me. And I remember when I held her in my arms, I looked down at her and I said, I'm going to love you like nobody is ever going to love you. And I meant it. And I didn't know at that time that I had a disease, and I did not know that I was going to take her brother, and her other 2 sisters to places that they shouldn't go to, and things that they shouldn't see, they were going to see. And, you know, it's really funny because during the time that I was drinking and using, and I was going to jail because I did those things too, people would tell me, don't you love your kids? And I would think to myself, I love my kids, then why don't you stop? And I thought, why don't I stop? You know, why can't I just put it down? People would tell me that they decided to stop drinking or stop using, and all they did was put it down. And I couldn't do it. And I thought for myself that I was a bad person. See, I never knew about the disease of alcoholism. I thought that there was something wrong with me. And you know what? I found out in the big book that I am bodily, mentally different from my fellows. And it isn't bad. I didn't start using drugs then. He went away and came back after being in Huntsville. And at that time, I had 2 more kids in between, because, you know, I can't stay alone. And when he came back, he was tired, but he was trying to stay clean by drinking. And he thought as long as he wasn't doing his drug of choice, that he was okay. And at the time, I was drinking quite a bit. And we were going into bars, and this man, every time he drank, he got ugly. He would end up getting into arguments, and I would get into fights. And this one time that happened, the bartender called the police, and the police came, and they said that he had started everything, and they took him into the car. And when they took him into the car, he started kicking the back of the seat and kicking the windows and kicking the doors and calling those policemen's mothers things you shouldn't call those policemen's mothers. And they took him away. And he called me, and when I went to go pick him up, he was a little bit bent. Didn't have a belt on, didn't have any shoes on, and he was hurting. They had taken him in the back room. And he told me he was hurt and that he needed something. And he didn't say about going to a doctor. And he said he needed something, and my family was into that kind of stuff. So I took him where he needed to go. And he got some heroin. And he got, all of a sudden, it was amazing. It's the best thing to make friends. We had a room full of friends in the living room. And they were all naughty. Mhm. And their head kept coming down, and I kept looking at them, and I thought, my God, I want some of that. I always want to be in full flight of reality, never want to be where I'm at. I want to be someplace else. I don't like where I'm at. And when I took some of that, I ended up changing completely. And that's part of my story. I also drank every single time that I could. And it wasn't every single day. It was a lot of times when I was sick, I'd get a bottle of Ripple. Or I'd get a short dog of white port and grapefruit juice just to smooth me out, because I'm uncomfortable in my own skin. And I need something to give me comfort, anything to click off. That's the way it was for me. At first, it was just about clicking off. And then after a while, it was like being normal. It wasn't about clicking off anymore. It was just about getting up and having something because I had to have. You know, it wasn't about the feelings. It was just about surviving. It was like eating, breathing, and just being. And I had to have. And I had those kids with me, and a lot of times when I got up in the morning, I couldn't take care of them, you know, until I ended up having a bottle of wine, and then I ended up getting a fix. And a lot of times those kids had to take care of themselves or help each other out. And I always thought that I was a good mother at that time because I had a house, but I couldn't take care of them. And I ended up losing that house, and I ended up losing those kids, and they went with my family. And I remember at the time, I thought that my family had taken them away from me. What I didn't realize was the disease of alcoholism had taken them away from me, because I could not do the things that you've seen the mothers do in Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best, because that's the way I judged myself. That's the way I should have been. And I couldn't do those things. So I got more and more into my disease. I ended up getting those kids back 5 years later. And when I got them back, I had gotten into methadone because I thought I was going to get clean. I was not doing my drug of choice, and as long as I wasn't doing my drug of choice, I was clean. And I started drinking Night Train and Mad Dog 2020. Cisco, taking pills, doing a little bit of recreational cocaine, and I thought I was clean. And I wasn't going to jail. I was okay. And those kids that I brought into my life, completely everything fell apart. They grew up, and I remember making promises to them, because I also went to jail, and I would tell them, you know what, this time it's going to be different. I promise you, this time it's going to be different. When I get out of here, we're going to get a place, nobody's going to come and live with us, and I'm going to be okay. And they would look at me with that look of hope. And each time that I broke those promises, that look got duller and duller and duller, and finally there was no more hope. The kids of alcoholics have that dead look, and my kids got that dead look. They stopped believing what I was saying, and they grew up, and they started getting into the same things that I was. I ended up, I had never gone to prison until I was in my late 40s. I had done a little bit of jail time, and I finally got to prison. And the way I got there was that my whole life was falling apart. The man I had been with for a long time died, and I no longer had anybody to pay my bills or to take care of me, and I had gotten old. And I ended up losing the house, ended up in a little room, and the progression was just real fast for me. From that little room, I couldn't even pay for that. My kids had gone to my mother's, and they were already grown. They weren't even little kids anymore. My daughter had a baby also, and my son had moved out, and my youngest daughter was gangbanging. And I ended up under a bridge. And it was real funny because being under that bridge was just as normal to me after a while as being in my living room. I got used to it. It wasn't until there was divine intervention, and I believe that God uses the police sometimes for divine intervention, as he did with me. And I got picked up. And I remember at that time when I went into that jail, it was different for me. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to die. I had scarred myself physically as well as emotionally and spiritually. I had endocarditis and I had had hepatitis, and my body was just real beat up. I looked like I was about 80 years old. And I remember at that time I got on my knees and I told God, you know what, I don't want to die. Please help me. You know, I had said those things before when I went into jail. And what would happen to me when I went before would be that I'd get healthy, I'd start thinking, and my thinking would say I deserve to get loaded. And this time, I just wanted God to help me. I didn't want to die. And I ended up not kicking, and I ended up getting sent to prison. And I remember while I was there, they put me in as a teacher's aide. And I was helping all these people to get their GED. And I wanted my GED because I had never gotten any kind of diplomas because I was always out there. And I was teaching all these people how to do their math and how to do their English and how to do their science. And they were going in there and getting their GED. And then I'd go in there and I wouldn't get it. You know, it's just like here in the program, you can talk a real good program, but if you don't apply the principles of the steps and do the application, it doesn't mean a damn thing. You can know that book from the front to the back, and I've seen a lot of people that do. And in fact, the man that took me through the book, he helped a lot of newcomers that couldn't stay sober through the book and through doing the steps, and he got loaded. And what I seen was that it was contempt prior to investigation, and he lost his being able to be taught. There was no more humility. That's my own opinion, you know. But I also, like Robert was talking about, I seen people here in the program that are examples of what to do and examples of what not to do. And that man was an example to me. And while I was there also, I believe that God talked to me in prison, because I think God talks to us sometimes if you just listen. And I thought, I heard that I needed to work with alcoholics and addicts in order to stay sober, actually clean. And I thought, well, I'll be a chemical dependency counselor. I know how to do all that stuff. I had enough in-lab experience, and I can tell you what to not do. And so that's the way I was gearing myself up for. And I was getting ready for my parole date, And the lieutenant called me in, and there was a lady there that was a friend of mine in the office, and he told me to sit down. And he told me he had gotten some information that day that he needed to give me, and it was that my daughter had died. And I remember when he told me, I thought it was my youngest daughter, Katina, because she was into the gangbanging. And my stomach dropped, and I said her name. And he looked down and he said, no, it's Valerie. And Valerie had been living by the side of a railroad track with her honey, and she couldn't get to a bottle of night train fast enough. Crossed the street and 2 cars hit her. And I shut down. And that was in November. And at the time I couldn't remember the day that she had died. I couldn't remember her birthday. I just completely shut down. And I came out of prison, and I did what I had to do. I went to the parole office, and I told them that I wanted to go to school and that I wanted to be this counselor. And they told me that I needed to go to a support group, and that I needed to show that I was clean and sober for 3 years. And I thought, well, I can do that. I've done time. And they gave me a number. They gave me a paper with some numbers. And I thought of myself as an addict. I didn't think of myself as an alcoholic. And I tried to get a hold of that other 12-step group. God was doing for me what I could not do for myself. And I believe that God puts us where he needs to put us for whatever reason that he needs to put us there. And just like in the big book on page 449, nothing happens in this world by mistake. And I got that paper, and I tried to call that number, and when I called, it was a recording, and I could not get that meeting. And I couldn't hear where it was at, but I remembered that place I had gone to all those years back that I had signed my card. And I went back there. And I remember when I walked in with my mom, because I was scared. Even being in prison, I was scared of coming into these rooms because I didn't know who you were, and I was always scared of going into new situations. And I was always scared of being in a large group of people or a small group of people, even if it was my family. I remember when we would go on outings, on picnics, everybody would be having fun, and I'd be sitting over here wondering, what about me? And I walked into that room, and there was a lady there, and she looked like a barfly. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? After all, I've made more money, and she always gives it away for free, probably. And I went up to her, and I told her, you know what, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm an addict. You know, addicts always want to pop their chests out. And she looked at me and she says, you know what, honey, that's okay. Just sit down. And I sat down at the back, under the clock. Don't sit under the clock. I sat there and I heard it tick, 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 tick. It was the longest hour and a half I've ever done in my life. And I couldn't wait to get out of that meeting. And I would listen and I would think, God, these people have so many problems. You know, I have problems of my own. I don't want to listen to theirs. And at the time, you know, they were asking for newcomers, and I didn't feel I was a newcomer because I had physical time. And so I didn't raise my hand. And they asked for 30 days, and I had more than 30 days, so I didn't raise my hand. 60 days, 90 days, I didn't raise my hand. I also never extended my hand. And I became defenseless against that first drink. I thought that physical sobriety ensured me long-time sobriety. I had never had it since I put a drink in my mouth. I had never been clean and sober. I had been pregnant and also used all the way to the delivery room. My kids hadn't seen me clean and sober all their life. And so I had 2 years and a month, and I didn't do any kind of program. Like I said, I didn't extend my hand, and I became defenseless. And my disease does not talk to me by telling me that go drink. It goes through a side door. And my disease talks to me in my own voice. You're bored. I was going to college, and I thought it was the last day of school instead of the first day. I didn't want to go home because I had to go to my mother. And I thought, I'll take the scenic route home through my neighborhood. And I got off that bus and I wanted some 7-Up. I don't even like soda. And there was a stop and go and there was a bar. And I went into that bar. And when I went in there, I never asked for soda. I like wine. And I asked if they had any wine, and they said they had some Burgundy in the back. And they brought me a glass, and I looked at that glass, and it was a really pretty ruby color. And I drank it real fast. And when I drank it, it was like, psst. And I drank the way I always drank, not intending to get drunk, and always getting thirstier. And I ended up leaving that bar with the owner and ended up in the back seat of a van with that demoralization that I always felt when I did those things. I went home, passed out. Next morning I woke up and my youngest daughter was standing right in front of me. And she looked at me and I looked at her, and she looked at me like, you're never going to get it. You're always going to be the same. And it mirrored everything that I felt about myself. And I broke. I broke inside. It wasn't those jails and it wasn't being under the bridge that broke me. I got used to those things. I broke inside, and that was the first step for me, my innermost self. And at that time that I broke, I heard things in my head that I had been hearing here in the meetings, and it was abandon yourself to God. Half measures avail you nothing. You don't get 50%, you get nothing. And what instilled hope for me was the promises. I thought that it was going to be material, and what I found out, it was a peace of mind that I was always searching for in a bottle, in a fix, in a pill. My life started changing because I made a decision. And the decision that I made was that I was going to follow somebody that knew something about sobriety, not me, because I knew how to drink and use. And I followed this lady, and she was nothing like me. She was a pure alcoholic, but she knew how to stay sober. And she told me that she was going to teach me some things, and she did. She spoon-fed me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was so desperate that I listened to her, and I did everything that she told me. And I got a life because of that. You know, at a year sober, I was still using people. I was living with this lady, and I thought that I was doing a kind act because I was her companion, and she was paying all the bills. And my sponsor told me, you can't do that. You need to be self-supporting through your own contributions, not theirs. And she put me in a sober living to manage. And I remember when I went in there, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? And I had given them a 6-month commitment. I always think of myself up here when I'm actually down here. And I forget that I got to climb. And the man whose place I took tonight, it was his sober living that I went into. And he was very kind to me. And he taught me a lot of things. And I ended up learning, and I ended up leaving there and opening up one for women and kids and women. And I was also able to go into my family and do the principles of these steps with my family and the family afterwards, because I had a sponsor that told me that I needed to do that. See, at 3 years sober, I thought I was Miss AA Princess. I was working with a lot of newcomers, and I was carrying a real good message. My own. And I wasn't taking it into the family. I remember one of my babies gave my daughter, my youngest daughter, a job at Pick and Save, and she was telling her how wonderful I was. And my daughter says, I wish I knew that lady. And then my other daughter, I got a call that she had tried to commit suicide. And when I went into the hospital room and she was hooked up to all those tubes and she was real gray, she looked at me and she said, I just want to die. You have the luxury of drinking and using, and I didn't. And I cried. And that night I had a commitment to speak out in Long Beach, and I didn't want to go. And I called my sponsor and I told him, what am I going to say to those people, that my kids are falling down? That I don't know what I'm doing? And he says, you go and share your experience, strength, and hope. And you share from the heart. And I went. Because I learned here in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that the people that get to stay here are the people that do what they don't want to do. And I cried. And then I started going in there and being of service to her. And then all of a sudden my son, he got blew up in a meth lab. He was in the hospital. And I went in there and I tried to talk program to him. He told me, I don't want to hear your shit. He says, maybe you don't have no power, but I do. I can stop anytime I want to. And he says, all I want is a mother. And I walked out of there and I was scared and I was crying, and I called my sponsor and she told me to call him back and tell him that this is the only way I know how to talk. See, I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's all I know how to do is talk program and talk the language that I was taught here. And I told him that, and he told me, you know what, Mom, if I ever need help, I'll come to you. And he did. But he wanted to do it his way. And God told him he had to go to meetings. He went to Dog in the Roof and he got sober. And he ended up getting 5 years. And on July 4th, he took a drink. And my granddaughter was the one that came to tell me. And she looked all around before she told me. And she said it real low, Grandma, my dad's drinking. And I asked my daughter-in-law, and the good Al-Anon that she is, she said, I think he had a couple of drinks. God bless him. See? He went to church and he stopped coming here. And he thought he had it licked. And all I know is that I don't have it licked. I'm beyond human aid. The only way that I access power is through those steps and through those traditions and through those the application of those principles and coming here into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and sharing my experience, strength, and hope and working with others. You know, I've had so many gifts also. It hasn't all been just a downside. You know, through one of those recovery homes, I ended up getting this baby. Her mother was going to prison and she didn't have anybody to take care of her. And I ended up with that baby, a little blonde, blue-eyed angel. And it's so wonderful to parent without guilt and to do it the way that you taught me. And that baby looks at me with trust. And she's pretty healthy. She's now 4 years old and she's still in my life, and her mother has come back, and I'm grandma. And that little girl looks at me with those blue eyes, and it's pure love. And like I said before, God has a plan sometimes, because I guess I was supposed to learn how to parent again. My grandson came to me 4 years ago, and he was very damaged. And when he came, there was something that I heard when he was in that fetal position, and I went in there to comfort him, and he said, "I feel trapped." And I understood that, because I always felt trapped. And I finally got freedom, because I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I heard a message of hope. And the gift I got with that was freedom through working the steps. No, I've been to a lot of places and I've done a lot of things that I never thought I was going to ever do. You know, I've been to Spain, I've been to Hawaii, I've been different places. And for being under that bridge, that's a lot. But I'll tell you what the real gift is. I don't wake up in the morning with that obsession. See, I remember that. I don't wake up with that. And I don't have to do those things that I used to do. All I have to do is come here for an hour and a half, share my experience, strength, and hope, work with other people, and trust God. And you know, when I come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I hear the tears and I hear the laughter, I know it's the music. And it touches me here. If you're new, stay. If you don't believe anything that's said here, stay anyway. You might come to believe. And if you don't believe, go back out and get what you had before. Thank you.